Since after all this technology, all these efforts are to shape our minds, there is no one better to talk about the psychology that makes us susceptible to cyber attack and misinformation. I'm really happy to have Dan Ariely with us that will tell us a bit more about it.
Very good. Thank you. Very lovely to be here, even though the topic, of course, is painful and complex. So I want to start by talking about why is the human mind so susceptible to so many attacks. So let's take a step back and ask ourselves, what is our metaphor for the human mind? How is the human mind working as a decision-making apparatus? We go around life, we encounter all kinds of things. How does it work? And my working metaphor is that the human mind is a vintage Swiss Army knife. Swiss Army knife and then vintage. What do I mean by that? The first part is that the human mind is like a Swiss Army knife. And the Swiss Army knife, if you think about it, is not particularly good for anything. There's never been a task that you say, I want to do X, where's my Swiss Army knife? It's always a compromise. You always want something else, but you don't have it. The Swiss Army knife is not particularly good at anything. Its greatness comes from being quite okay in lots of things. Right? That's the first part of it. And the second good thing is we can carry it with us. And the human mind is kind of like this. We're not excellent in anything. We're kind of okay in lots of things, and we can carry our mind with us when we go. But my metaphor is not the Swiss Army knife. My metaphor is a vintage Swiss Army knife. And what I mean by that is that we were designed, the set of tools that we have, were designed in a very different evolutionary period for very different goals. And because of that, we have arrived at this time in history with just a really bad set of tools. Now, this is the still set of tools that we carry with us. The only thing is that are irrelevant. So, for example, do we have a tool to think about long term? No. Do we have a tool to think about trust in an era when we don't meet people face to face? No. Do we have a tool to think about compound interest and so on? You can just go ahead and think about it. We have tools that are designed to think about face-to-face interaction, hunting, gathering, collecting food, all kinds of things like that. And because of that, we created an environment that is really ill-suited for our tools, but that's what we have. And I think that if we want to understand what's going on, and more importantly, we want to think how we get out of it, we need to understand what we're coming to the party with and not assume more. I think that we can't assume that people can be rational. We just have to assume that this is what we have, and now we need to design the environment with that in mind. So let me give you some examples. So in the previous panel, there were lots of questions about, I'll call them conspiracies, whatever you think about. Why would people believe that? And you can ask yourself, why would somebody wake up one morning and choose to believe that there's an evil force that is trying to do X, Y, and Z to them? It's a terrible way to live. I've talked to many conspiracy theorists. When you think about it, it's an awful life. Everybody I talk to feel that there's a huge party, Bill Gates, the Illuminati, Jewish people, all kinds of things like that. I have now a website that I invite anti-Semites to talk to me. So once or twice a week, I have discussions with people who declare themselves as anti-Semites. Before that, I talked for 2 years with people who believe that COVID. The name of the website is something like Dan Trying to Understand Anti-Semitism. And you can either apply if you think you apply, or you can nominate other people and then I reach out to them. So why would somebody wake up and say, I want to believe that Bill Gates and the Illuminati are trying to poison the world with COVID or something like that? It turns out the right way to view it is to say, what is the conspiracy an answer for? It comes as a response to something. So let me tell you about 2 studies, and then we'll come back to this answer. So imagine the following studies. There are lots of tribes around the world. There are many tribes that fish. Some fish in the ocean, some fish in the lakes. Imagine we take the tribes that fish in the ocean, the tribes that fish in the lake. Which one of them has a more predictable life? The lake. The lake is kind of the same day after day, changes are slow. Which one of those two tribes create more superstitions? The ocean. Because what is superstition giving us? A sense of control in a world that we don't have control. Now let's move closer to conspiracies. Imagine I show you a painting of random black and white dots. We call this white noise. One white noise can be either full spectrum hearing, or it could be this random selection of red and white dots. And I show you one of those, and I say, do you see an image there? And you say yes or no, and I show you another one, and we do 20 of those. And the question is, in how many of those 20 would you see an image? So we do that, but we also stress you out. In this particular experiment, people go skydiving. And we do this exercise on the ground, when you just get on the plane, when you're in the air, and when you're just about to jump. What do you think happens to the number of faces or figures or images that people recognize as being real as a function of stress? It increases. And why? And why is it increasing? Again, let's go to our evolutionary history. Imagine that you're about to hunt, and you think there's a tiger. What does your system do? Stress basically says, over-extrapolate signals. You see two leaves moving, pretend that the moment we get into stress, the system goes into hyperdrive to interpret all kinds of things as being negative signals. In any case, I think that in general, if we want to understand this really complex world, we always have to ask ourselves, how does this fit with the human mind? Of course, there are many more things like that, but you can see how this starts. I'll give you one more example on the conspiracy side, then we'll move out of that. There's a story in the Bible that there were two tribes that had a fight. After the fight, they settled on two sides of the river, and then they walked around, but Jordan River is very shallow, easy to cross, and they would meet people, and they wanted to make sure that they are from their tribe and not from the other tribe. It turns out that those two tribes pronounced the name of the plant shibboleth slightly differently. One of them said shibboleth, one of them said seaboleth. So what do? They would walk around with this plant, and they would show it to somebody and say, hey, how do you call this plant? And if you call it the way I do, we're from the same tribe, everything is fine. If you call it the way the other tribe calls it, then I need to chase you away. Now, we now use this term, shibboleth, as a speech that looks like it's about the facts, but it's actually about identity. Because when I show you the plant, do I really care about the name of the plant? No, I care about your identity. Think about your favorite politician or your least favorite politician, and ask yourself how much of their speech is shibboleth. How much of the speech really has nothing to do with the truth. It's not a statement about the state of the world, it's a statement about identity. And part of the things that happen is that people join groups, they do things like that, and so on. In any case, this is not coming in the background. We have a strong need for identity. How do we solve that problem? We solve it this way. Something?
You're great.
Okay. Very good. Okay. So the main point I want to make is that the human mind is not designed for our period, and we have a few built-in things that used to be okay, and now they're not okay. Stress and seeing patterns in leaves used to serve us well, not so well now. I'll give you another example. Risk attitude. One of the main principles in behavioral economics is something called loss aversion. We hate losing more than we enjoy gaining. If you lost $10,000 today, you'll be really miserable for a very long time. If you gain $10,000, you'd only be so happy for a shorter time. Why? Why do we have this loss aversion? Again, imagine you're hunting in the jungle, and imagine that something good happens and you manage to hunt a rabbit. How good is that? It's a little good. You have food for another 2 days. Now imagine something bad happened and a tiger hunted you. How bad is that? Really bad. So evolutionary history, the upside and the downsides were very, very different. And nature caused us to over-focus on the downside rather than to think about the upside, just because the downside was so much more important. Now, we don't necessarily live in that way. If you think about investing in the stock market, the expected value is positive. We don't have the same negative to positive aspects, but we still think this way. Couple of other examples. We are trusting creatures. We're trusting creatures. When we meet people, our first instinct is to trust. In fact, if we took random statement like an ostrich egg weighs more than 2 kilos, or we do the opposite, weighs less than 2 kilos, and I just present to you random statement, odds are that you would believe that the statements are correct. And trust is really interesting because it's also a wonderful thing, right? So let me describe to you something called the trust game. So imagine there are two people sitting in different rooms. We tell them they'll never meet the other person. The other person will never know who they are, complete anonymity. And we say to person one, we say, you get $100. And you could do one of two things with these $100. You could keep the money and go home, in which case you're $100 richer. Or you can send it to the second person. If you send it to the second person, the money will quadruple. By the time it gets to this other person, it will be $400. And that person could do one of two things. They can either take the $400 and go home, or they can decide to give you back $200. So you are now facing the question of, what will the other person do? Are they trustworthy? Now, what's the economic prediction? The economic prediction is nobody will trust and nobody will reciprocate. It turns out people are nicer than economic prediction. People are trusting, not everybody, but the vast majority. And the vast majority who get the $400 feel compelled to reciprocate, and they send the money, back. So that means that we are wired for trust, and we are wired for reciprocation. It was a very good thing to do when we lived in a small community and so on. Right now, I think it also serves us mostly, but it also creates a huge point of failure. We're trusting, and it creates, we see lots of scams happening, but partially it's trust. And by the way, one of the things that happen as people get older is that people stop encoding negative things and start encoding more of the positive things. So for example, imagine that you're in a fMRI machine and we look at your brain, we look at the activity in your brain, and you show people pictures of positive things, puppies, flowers, and bad things, injuries, amputations. Young people and old people encode the positive things in the same way. Older people stop encoding the negative things in the same negative way. And you can imagine why this is a good strategy, but young people always think, oh, when I'll be 50, life will be not worth it, and so on. The people of 50 think about 70, but it turns out that when people get older, they actually become happier than they expected. One of the things is our brain is stopping to paying attention to negative things in the same way. Also makes people, you can see why it's good, also makes people more susceptible to fraud because people are more trusting. Okay. Other things that we do, nature has really wanted us to be lazy. The brain uses 20-25% of our energy. When now we have way too much energy, we wish we would think more, but nature wanted us, whenever it's possible, not to think this much. So what do? We worked very hard not to think that much. That's why, for example, when something hasn't happened for like 3 periods, we don't keep on thinking whether it could happen. I know kind of October 7th is in everybody's mind. How can something like this happen? Very simply. If for a while no news is coming, we really start focusing on it as if nothing coming. It's very hard to keep attention, very hard to keep on fighting against our nature to basically say the world has changed, let's just very easily assume that nothing like this would matter. Another interesting challenge we have is that we learn the wrong lesson from low probability events. Let's think about this, and I think in cyber it's one of the most important bad lessons. Imagine you think that texting and driving has a probability of getting into accident of 2%. And one day you text and drive. By the way, how many people here in the last month have touched your phone at least once while driving? Just as a, okay. Imagine you think it's 2%, and one day it's kind of almost red light and slightly traffic. I mean, you make a story for yourself, and you touch your phone, and nothing happened. Nothing happened because it's only 2% chance that something bad will happen. But on the other side of that, what is your intuitive conclusion? Maybe it's not 2%. And then you do it more and more and more. The reality is, with low probability events, every time that nothing bad happens, we learn a bad lesson. I'll give you a very sad example. Do you remember a few years ago, BP spilled a lot of oil into the ocean? If you look at the story, and I met with them a few times about this, here is what happened. Imagine you're a captain on an oil rig, and from time to time there's a red light that blips. And you have to choose whether to stop the rig, replace something, take something out, figure out what's happening. Or you can say, let me ignore this for half an hour and see where we are. Now, these lights are designed to be extra sensitive, right? So the false alarm rate is very high. So most of the time, they blip when there's even a small probability, but they're designed to have a low probability event. And most times when you ignore it, what's your feeling? I saved the company money. Look at me. I was supposed to shut down this thing, but instead I saved millions and so on. Until one day it's not. Human nature, we overlearn in a wrong way from low probability events. Right? Now, you can think of it as consumers. Every time I'm not careful with my password, or I log into a network I don't know, and nothing bad happens, what's the consequence? We learn the wrong lesson. So we have lots of these things that are about learning the wrong lesson. Now, for me, when I look at the world of cyber, I think that our main enemy is the human mind. And yes, I know technology is amazing, but at the end of the day, there's also the human element. And I think the human element is sadly not sufficiently integrated into the equation. Certainly the weakest part of the link, and all hackers know that that's the weakest part of the link. Now, think back to our metaphor of the vintage Swiss Army knife. And think about a scale between cars and social media. Okay? Cars get better every year. How do cars get better every year? Cars get better every year by understanding in greater detail what mediocre drivers we are. And the cars try to compensate for how mediocre we are as drivers. It started by saying, like, I can just imagine the car engineer saying, these people know that they should look behind their shoulder and what's happening behind, but they don't. Let's give them a rear view mirror. Let's give them a side mirror. They drive too close, let's give them anti-lock brakes. All kinds of things like that. And now we have sensors and all kinds of things that, and basically the engineers are trying to understand people, understand the mistakes people do, and try to block all of those things. On the other side, we have social media. Social media. And by the way, with cars, we and cars get better because they know we don't pay attention and they help us. And they're blinking lights and how to move the steering and so on. On the other hand, we have social media. social media also gets better. How do social media get better every year? They get better also by understanding human weaknesses, but by taking advantage of them. So, for example, let's go back to our ancient history. We love gossip. Why do we love gossip? When we lived in a small community, gossip was a great tool. Imagine that I had an apple, and you wanted to take my apple. And let's say you're stronger and faster than me. If it was just me and you might have taken my apple and go away. But if we have gossip, and everybody loves gossip, you know that if you'll take my apple, I'll gossip about you. And now I have a superpower. I have kind of the doomsday machine weapon that if you'll do something to me, I can talk to everybody, nobody will work with you anymore, and it's an amazing thing. So gossip is an amazing tool, not after the fact, but for prevention. It's a deterrence. But it only works in a deterrence if we live in a small community and we know each other. Now you move to the internet, gossip is just bad for us. It has no role in deterrence, it just has this role of being angry with other people, all kinds of things like that, cancel culture, you name it. So for me, the big question is, by the way, I love to use this metaphor between cars and social media. Of course, a lot of things that are nefarious are much worse. Right? So people who try to do attacks are not just like social media, they're using things that are much, much worse than social media. And for me, the question is, what kind of world are we going to build? And there's kind of an interesting contrast when we think about the physical world and we think about the mental world. Think about the physical world, this room, for example. Everything that has been built here has been built to augment our fragile physical ability to make us slightly better. And this has really been the human endeavor for the last 300 years. Superman could fly, we couldn't, we invented planes. Superman could sit in the dark, couldn't see in the dark, we couldn't, we have lights. Superman could be in the cold, we can't, we have sweaters and heaters and so on. We took our frail human body and with technology we augmented it, and now we, together with technology, we're Superman-like. I think the same thing is also true about the human mind. I think the human mind is just as frail as the human body, in different ways, but just as frail. And the question is, what kind of world are we building? Are we building a world for human beings with frail minds and so on, or are we building worlds for the Superman of the mind? And I think we would be much better off if we understood our limitation and build to augment what we can't do very well. And I want to leave you with one last topic. When I was doing my research on conspiracies, one of the activities that became very clear is the split in societies, us versus them. And I started thinking about this study on feeling rejected, ostracism. And the way this research started is fascinating. The guy who started it tells the following story. He walks in the park with his dog, and he sees two people playing frisbee. One of them misses, and the frisbee falls not too far from his feet. He picks up the frisbee, throws to one of them, and to his surprise, they throw it back to him. And the three of them play frisbee for a few moments. And after a few moments, they stop throwing to him the frisbee, and they just play between the two of them. And he described how he stands there, feeling rejected. Now, he didn't know them, he didn't come to play with them, but they started playing with him and they all of a sudden stopped. So, like a good psychologist, he did experiments that tried to mimic that situation. He got a lab at the edge of campus next to a little yard, invited people to come, let's say at 10 a.m., and he had two research assistants that pretended to be participants as well. 10 a.m., the new participant comes, there are two participants waiting there already. He opens the door, he says, sorry, we're 10 minutes late, please wait. They close the door. One of the research assistants picks up a soccer ball and they start tossing it between the three of them. They toss it for 10 minutes, they stop, open the door, call the participants, and they test him on all kinds of things. I'll tell you in a second what. Condition number 2 starts in the same way. They show up 10 o'clock, open the door, close the door, start tossing the soccer ball around. They toss the soccer ball around for 5 minutes. And then they stop throwing it to the participant. And the participant just sits there for 5 minutes watching the other two people play. They open the door, they invite them in. What do you think is the impact of that? It turns out that basically everything good about humanity gets lower and everything bad goes up. People become more pessimistic, they give less money to charity, they help less, they do all kinds of things. Basically, feeling rejected is an unbelievably bad feeling. There was a book that came out in Hebrew not too long ago called Vechitetu, if anybody here is reading. And this book looked at 4 conflicts. Ireland, Greece, between the Turks, Cyprus, between the Greece and the Turks, South Africa, and Israel. And the interesting thing about this was that his analysis of what happened in South Africa, and by the way, that then also made its way, started in Ireland and then made its way to South Africa, which was the question of mutual respect. And I think that one of the things we're doing really bad as a society is getting people to feel rejected. We're certainly doing it in Israel with our politics. I don't know where everybody is here, but if, I teach at a university called Duke in North Carolina, but if somebody in the US came to you and say that they believe in a different version of you in terms of abortion rights, it's very hard not to show them immediate rejection. If somebody in the US now came and believed in a different Democrats versus Republican, very hard not to show them rejection. Israeli, Palestinian, whatever you say. I think one of the biggest challenges is that it is very hard for us not to show rejection, and rejection works on people in much deeper, terrible ways. So what do I want to say about all of this? Very hard to move forward without understanding human nature. It's really one of our greatest obstacles. It's our obstacle in trust and cyber fraud. It's our obstacle in hate. It's our obstacle in getting people to believe something in a common way. And we have to fix that to move forward. So I'm hoping that all of you will become at least slightly interested in social science and what it can say to your day-to-day. That's basically it for me. I have a couple of minutes if anybody has a question. We yes, no. If there's an urgent question, if not, you have a bathroom.
You started the question. Anyone have a question?
No, I think I've been clear. Okay, so thank you very much.